Hello, everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
A quiet Saturday morning. Have you ever felt ready to give up on love, on learning English, or even on believing that small things can still change your life? I used to think real romance needed expensive gifts or dramatic surprises. Then one quiet Saturday morning in the United States, I walked into my laundry room expecting to hear the loud sound of my washing machine. Instead, I found something that completely changed the way I looked at marriage, family, and even the simple English words I heard every day. What happened next still makes me smile, and the biggest surprise did not happen until later that afternoon. It was a cool spring morning. Sunlight slipped through the kitchen window, while fresh coffee filled the house with a warm smell. Everything felt peaceful, but my mind was busy. I had a long list of weekend chores waiting for me. The laundry basket was overflowing. The kitchen needed cleaning. My children were still sleeping upstairs after a busy school week. I quietly told myself that I would probably spend the whole morning working instead of relaxing. When I walked toward the laundry room, I suddenly stopped. The washing machine was already running. At first, I thought I had forgotten to start it the night before. I stood there for a few seconds, confused. Then I noticed a familiar blue t-shirt sticking out of the basket. It belonged to my husband. I looked around the corner. There he was. My American husband was carefully separating white clothes from dark clothes. He was reading every clothing label with complete concentration, almost like he was studying for an important exam. A few seconds later he smiled, held up one of my sweaters, and quietly said, "Cold water is safer for this one." I laughed. Not because he looked funny, because he looked completely serious. That tiny moment touched my heart much more than I expected. He was not helping because I asked him. He was not trying to impress anyone. He simply believed our home belonged to both of us. As I watched him fold towels with surprising care, I realized something interesting. Many English learners memorize phrases like, "I love you," "I miss you," or "you are beautiful." Those expressions are lovely, but that morning I learned another sentence without opening any textbook. "Can I do the laundry?" Only 5 simple words. Yet somehow, they sounded more romantic than 100 flowers. Living in the United States has taught me that love often hides inside ordinary routines. Grocery shopping together. Cleaning the kitchen after dinner. Folding warm clothes while talking about our children's funny stories from school. These everyday moments may never appear in romantic movies, but they quietly build strong families. Psychologists often explain that consistent small acts of kindness create trust more effectively than occasional grand gestures. Looking back, I could understand why. Every folded shirt silently said, "We are a team." Without realizing it, I was also practicing English. My husband naturally repeated simple words like detergent, fabric softener, dryer, basket, and fold. Because the conversation happened during real life instead of inside a classroom, the vocabulary stayed in my memory much longer. Learning English suddenly felt relaxed, useful, and surprisingly enjoyable. I had no idea that this peaceful Saturday would soon become one of the most unforgettable days of our marriage. Just a few hours later, while we were finishing the last basket of laundry, one unexpected conversation would completely change the meaning of everything I had believed about love, appreciation, and the invisible work that keeps a family together. Different cultures, same heart. Have you ever realized that one ordinary conversation can quietly expose everything you believed about love? That afternoon, while I thought we were simply finishing the laundry, my husband asked me one gentle question that completely caught me off guard. I froze. I smiled for a second, then suddenly felt emotional. It wasn't because of the question itself. It was because I finally understood why our marriage felt different from what I had expected. And the answer I gave him led to an even bigger surprise before the day was over. The last towels were warm from the dryer. I folded one while he folded another. The room was peaceful except for the soft humming sound of the machine. Then he looked at me and asked, "Do you still think this is my job or your job?" I laughed because I honestly did not know how to answer. For a moment, I simply looked at him. Then I admitted, "Sometimes I still feel guilty when you do so much around the house." He smiled kindly and shook his head. "Why would you feel guilty? We both live here. We both make the laundry. We both cook. We both clean. We both love this family." His words stayed in my mind long after the conversation ended. I realized he never spoke about chores as favors. He spoke about them as shared responsibilities. That simple difference changed everything. Instead of saying, "I'm helping you," he always said, "We're doing this together." The words sounded small, but they carried a completely different feeling. I began paying closer attention to families around me in our neighborhood in the United States. On Saturday mornings, I often saw husbands pushing grocery carts while their wives compared vegetables. Fathers carried sleeping toddlers through parking lots. Couples washed cars together while laughing over music playing from a small speaker. No one seemed embarrassed to share ordinary responsibilities. Instead, teamwork looked completely normal. That observation slowly changed my own thinking. I realized love was becoming visible in everyday habits instead of dramatic celebrations. Flowers eventually fade. Expensive gifts become ordinary. But someone quietly remembering to wash your favorite sweater the right way. My husband naturally used words like share, responsibility, partnership, teamwork, appreciate, and respect. They were not difficult vocabulary words. Yet, hearing them inside real family conversations made their meaning much deeper than any dictionary definition. Sometimes I repeated the words softly while folding clothes. My pronunciation became more natural because the emotions connected to the language were real. Researchers who study healthy relationships often explain that couples who regularly share household responsibilities report greater relationship satisfaction and lower daily stress. That idea suddenly felt very personal. I was no longer reading about happiness. I was living it one load of laundry at a time. Later that evening, I opened one of the kitchen cabinets to put away fresh towels. Something small fell onto the floor. At first, I thought it was an old grocery receipt. But when I picked it up, I realized it was a handwritten note from my husband. After reading only the first sentence, my heart began beating faster. I had absolutely no idea he had been quietly planning something for weeks. And what I discovered next would make this ordinary Saturday unforgettable forever. Laundry became a love language. What if the smallest... My hands were shaking as I unfolded the handwritten note. I expected a shopping list or a reminder about the weekend. Instead, I found words that made the quiet laundry room feel warmer than ever before. But those beautiful words were only the beginning. Before the sun went down, one unexpected visitor would test everything my husband had quietly taught me about love. The note was written in simple black ink, in my husband's familiar handwriting. It said, "Thank you for everything you do that nobody notices." I notice. I always will. I read the sentence once. Then I read it again. My eyes filled with tears before I even realized I was crying. There was nothing dramatic about those words. There were no expensive promises or perfect poetry. Yet they touched my heart more deeply than any romantic card I had ever received. I suddenly understood that appreciation does not have to be loud. Sometimes it arrives as quietly as warm towels fresh from the dryer. When my husband walked into the kitchen, he smiled after seeing the note in my hands. "You found it earlier than I expected," he said with a little laugh. I asked him why he had hidden it. He shrugged and answered, "Because people often hear complaints every day. I wanted you to discover gratitude instead." That sentence stayed with me for the rest of the afternoon. It sounded so simple, yet it carried a lesson I would never forget. As we prepared dinner together, I began noticing other small things that had always been there. He filled my water glass without asking. I chopped vegetables while he washed the cutting board before I even finished cooking. We moved around the kitchen almost like a dance. Nobody was keeping score. Nobody was counting who had done more. We were simply taking care of each other. That evening also became another unexpected English lesson. My husband naturally used expressions like, "I appreciate you," "Take your time," "We're in this together," and "I'll handle it." These were not difficult phrases, but hearing them in real family conversations made them unforgettable. I quietly repeated each expression while setting the dinner table. Learning English suddenly felt connected to kindness instead of pressure. I realized language becomes easier to remember when it carries genuine emotion. Relationship experts often explain that couples who regularly express appreciation experience stronger emotional security and greater long-term happiness. Gratitude changes the atmosphere inside a home. Even one sincere sentence can reduce stress and increase feelings of connection. Looking around our kitchen, I no longer saw ordinary chores. I saw dozens of quiet opportunities to say, "I care about you," without speaking many words at all. Just when I thought the day could not become any more meaningful, our doorbell rang. My husband looked surprised because we were not expecting anyone. When he opened the front door, our next-door neighbor stood there holding a large laundry basket and wearing an embarrassed smile. She asked one unusual question that made both of us look at each other in complete surprise. At that moment, I had no idea that our peaceful conversation about love was about to become something much bigger than our own family. Have you ever answered your front door expecting a quick conversation, only to discover a lesson that changes the way you see your family forever? Our neighbor wasn't carrying cookies or borrowing sugar. She was holding a heavy laundry basket, looking nervous, and after her first sentence, the smile disappeared from my face. What she revealed about my husband was something I had never noticed before, and it made me realize that love is often seen more clearly by strangers than by the people living inside the same house. Our neighbor, Emily, smiled politely before taking a deep breath. "I hope this isn't a strange question," she said. "Can I ask your husband how he gets the stains out of my son's baseball uniform?" For a second, I thought she was joking. I looked at my husband, and he simply laughed. "Sure," he replied. "Come on in." As she stepped into our kitchen, I suddenly realized this wasn't the first time someone had asked him for household advice. Apparently, he had quietly become the neighborhood's unofficial laundry expert without ever mentioning it to me. Emily placed the uniform on the kitchen counter. There were grass stains, dirt, and bright orange sports drink marks across the front. My husband calmly explained each step while filling a small bowl with cool water. "Don't rush," he said. "Treat the stain first. Give it time. Then wash it gently." I watched him speak with patience, never acting like he knew everything. Instead, he smiled and encouraged Emily to try it herself. It wasn't really about laundry anymore. It was about sharing knowledge without making someone feel embarrassed. Listening to that conversation became an unexpected English lesson for me. I heard useful expressions like, "Take your time," "Let it soak," "Be patient," "It works better this way," and "Don't worry." We've all done this before. They were simple, natural phrases that Americans use every day. I quietly repeated them in my mind because they sounded friendly and easy to remember. I wasn't sitting in a classroom. I wasn't memorizing vocabulary lists. I was simply living my life, and English was becoming part of it naturally. As the conversation continued, Emily smiled and said something that completely surprised me. "Your husband always makes people feel comfortable asking questions." I looked at him again, seeing him through someone else's eyes for the first time. She wasn't praising his laundry skills. She was talking about his kindness. Suddenly I understood why so many small moments in our home felt peaceful. Respect wasn't something he talked about. It was something he practiced every single day. Psychologists often say that healthy relationships grow stronger through emotional safety. When people feel accepted instead of judged, they communicate more openly and solve problems more easily. Standing in my own kitchen, I realized I had been experiencing that without giving it a name. My husband never laughed when I made small mistakes in English. If I forgot a word, he simply helped me finish the sentence with a smile. That quiet encouragement gave me confidence, and confidence helped me learn faster than fear ever could. Emily thanked us and carried the now-treated uniform toward the front door. Before leaving, she turned around with a thoughtful expression. "By the way," she said softly, "I almost didn't come today. But after what happened at my house this morning, I didn't know who else to talk to." My husband and I exchanged a worried glance. Her voice suddenly sounded different, and I realized this visit had never been about laundry alone. Whatever she was about to tell us would change the entire direction of our peaceful Saturday. A small misunderstanding. What would you do if a neighbor's quiet confession suddenly made you question everything you believed about a happy marriage? I thought our Saturday was almost over. I thought the biggest surprise had already happened. I was completely wrong. The next few minutes became so emotional that even the sound of the washing machine seemed to disappear. One simple conversation revealed that the strongest relationships are not built by perfect people. They are built by people willing to change before it's too late. Emily stood silently near our front door, holding the laundry basket close to her chest. After taking a slow breath, she finally spoke. "My husband and I argued this morning," she said. "Not because of the laundry, but because the laundry became the last thing either of us could ignore. The room became very quiet. I gently invited her back to the kitchen table, and she accepted with a grateful smile. My husband poured 3 cups of hot tea without saying a word. Emily looked down at her hands before continuing. It wasn't really about clothes, she whispered. It was about feeling invisible. Those words touched me immediately because I knew exactly what she meant. Sometimes the hardest part of family life is not being tired. It is wondering whether anyone notices how hard you try. My husband listened carefully. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush to offer advice. When Emily finished speaking, he simply said, "Everyone wants to feel appreciated. Sometimes we forget to say thank you until frustration becomes louder than kindness." His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. I suddenly remembered the handwritten note he had hidden for me earlier that day. "Thank you for everything you do that nobody notices." Until that moment, I thought the note was only for me. Now I realized it reflected the way he tried to live every day. Appreciation was not a special event. It was a habit. Our conversation naturally became another gentle English lesson. Emily smiled as she repeated phrases like, "I understand," "I appreciate you," "Let's work together," "I'm listening," and "How can I help?" These simple expressions sounded ordinary, but they carried powerful emotions. I quietly repeated them after she spoke, noticing how natural they felt. I realized that learning English through real conversations about research in relationship psychology often shows that feeling appreciated is one of the strongest predictors of long-term relationship satisfaction. Couples who regularly express gratitude tend to communicate more openly and recover from disagreements more quickly. Sitting at our kitchen table, I wasn't thinking about research papers. I was watching those ideas come alive through 2 honest conversations between 3 ordinary people. After almost an hour, Emily smiled for the first time since arriving. "I think tonight I'll start with 2 words," she said softly. "Thank you." My husband nodded. "Small words," he replied, "can change very big days." As Emily walked toward the door, she suddenly turned back. "Actually," she said with a nervous laugh, "there's one more reason I came here." She reached into her purse and carefully pulled out a folded envelope with my name written across the front. I stared at it in complete confusion. I had never seen that handwriting before. My husband looked just as surprised as I was. The moment I reached for the envelope, I had a strange feeling that whatever was inside would reveal a secret neither of us expected to discover on this unforgettable Saturday. Science behind shared chores. What if one mysterious envelope could prove that the smallest acts inside your home are changing lives you never even knew you touched? My name was written across the front in neat handwriting, but I had never seen the envelope before. My husband looked just as confused as I was. Emily smiled nervously and whispered, "Please read it." I slowly opened the envelope, expecting an ordinary note. Instead, I discovered a message that made my heart race and completely changed the meaning of our simple Saturday. Inside was a folded letter with only one sentence at the top. "You don't know me, but your family gave me hope." I stopped reading for a moment and looked at Emily. She nodded gently. "It's from my younger sister," she explained. "She visited our neighborhood a few weeks ago while you were outside folding laundry together." I could hardly believe it. We had never even spoken to her. Emily continued quietly. She had been thinking about ending her engagement because she believed happy marriages only existed in movies. Then she watched the two of you laughing while folding towels in the front yard. She told me it wasn't the laundry that surprised her. It was the respect. She said she had never seen two people smile so naturally while doing something so ordinary. I felt completely speechless. My husband looked down, almost embarrassed. "We were just doing chores," he said softly. Emily smiled. "Exactly. That's why it mattered." I unfolded the rest of the letter. Emily's sister wrote that she realized love was probably less about grand romantic moments and more about choosing each other during ordinary Tuesdays, busy Saturdays, and tired evenings. She thanked us for reminding her that kindness could be quiet and still be powerful. That letter stayed in my hands for several minutes. It made me wonder how many moments in life become meaningful without us ever noticing. Sometimes we think nobody is paying attention, yet our everyday actions may quietly encourage someone else to believe in hope again. Later that evening, my husband and I talked about why simple teamwork feels so comforting. Research in psychology suggests that couples who regularly share household responsibilities often experience stronger trust, lower daily stress, and greater relationship satisfaction because cooperation reduces the feeling that one partner carries life's invisible burdens alone. Looking around our home, those findings suddenly felt very real. Every shared task was also a shared message. You're not carrying this alone. That conversation became another gentle English lesson. My husband naturally used expressions like, "We're a team. Little things matter. I appreciate your effort. Let's figure it out together." And "You don't have to do this alone." I quietly repeated every phrase after him. The vocabulary itself was simple, but the emotions attached to those words made them unforgettable. I realized that learning English through meaningful conversations was much easier than memorizing isolated sentences from a textbook. As the evening grew darker, Emily thanked us again and finally headed home. I thought our emotional day had finally reached its peaceful ending. Then my phone buzzed. A new message appeared from our oldest child, who had been spending the afternoon with friends. The text contained only 8 words, "Mom, I need to tell you something tonight." My heart skipped a beat. Those words didn't sound casual at all, and before I could reply, another message arrived that made me fear this unforgettable Saturday was about to become even more surprising than either of us had imagined. Our children were watching. Have you ever discovered that your children were learning from you when you thought they weren't paying attention at all? My heart was racing as I stared at my phone. The message from our oldest child felt unusually serious. I imagined dozens of possibilities in just a few seconds. Was something wrong? Had an accident happened? Or was there a secret we had completely missed? When the front door finally opened that evening, I realized the truth was far more emotional than anything I had imagined, and it completely changed the way I saw our family forever. A few minutes later, our oldest child walked into the house with a thoughtful smile. "Mom," they said softly, "can we talk?" My husband and I sat down together at the kitchen table. For a brief moment, nobody spoke. Then our child looked at both of us and laughed nervously. "Don't worry," they said. "Nothing bad happened." I finally took a deep breath. "I was at a friend's house today," our child continued. "Something happened there that made me think about our family." I listened carefully. My friend kept apologizing because his parents were arguing about cleaning the house. His dad said laundry wasn't his responsibility. His mom looked exhausted. Nobody seemed happy. Our child paused before looking directly at my husband. On the way home, I suddenly realized I've never thought about laundry as mom's job or dad's job. The room became completely silent. Our child smiled warmly. To me, it's just something our family does together. I felt tears filling my eyes again. Without realizing it, my husband and I had been teaching something much bigger than how to wash clothes or fold towels. We had been teaching what partnership looks like. Not through lectures. Not through rules. Simply through ordinary Saturdays that seemed completely unimportant at the time. My husband quietly replied, "I'm proud that you noticed." Our child shrugged with a little smile. I didn't notice until today. I thought every family worked like ours. That sentence stayed with me. Children often learn by watching far more than by listening. Psychologists frequently explain that young people develop many of their lifelong relationship expectations through daily observation. Respect, cooperation, patience, and kindness become normal when they are consistently modeled at home. Looking back over the years, I realized our children had been quietly collecting hundreds of small memories, passing the laundry basket, setting the dinner table together, laughing while cleaning the kitchen after family meals. Those ordinary moments had become their definition of love. The conversation naturally turned into another relaxed English practice session. My husband smiled and said, "Actions speak louder than words." Our child repeated it with perfect pronunciation before adding another expression we often hear at home, "We're in this together." I loved hearing those simple English phrases because they carried real family memories. Learning a language becomes much easier when every sentence is connected to someone you love instead of just a vocabulary list. Later that night, after everyone had gone upstairs, I walked back into the laundry room alone. The baskets were empty. Fresh towels were neatly folded. The house was quiet again. I thought the emotional surprises of the day were finally over. Then I noticed something unusual sitting on top of the washing machine. It was a small folded piece of paper in my youngest child's handwriting. As soon as I opened it and read the very first line, I covered my mouth in complete disbelief. I had no idea that one simple sentence from my youngest child was about to become the most unforgettable moment of our entire weekend. Love in ordinary moments. What if the most powerful love letter in your home wasn't written by your husband at all, but by the smallest person in your family? As I unfolded the little note resting on top of the washing machine, I expected a funny drawing or a simple reminder. Instead, I read one sentence that stopped me completely. My heart felt full, my eyes filled with tears. And I suddenly realized that our children had been writing the true story of our marriage in their hearts all along. But the final line of that note pointed toward one more surprise that neither my husband nor I saw coming. The handwriting was uneven, with a few letters leaning in different directions. It was clearly written by my youngest child. The note simply said, "When I grow up, I want a marriage like yours because you help each other every day." I read this sentence slowly, then read it again. The words were simple enough for any English learner to understand, yet their meaning reached deeper than I could explain. I stood there quietly for several minutes. I wasn't crying because someone had called our family perfect. We certainly weren't perfect. We still forgot appointments, disagreed about schedules, and sometimes left dishes in the sink longer than we should have. I was crying because our children had never been looking for perfection. They had been looking for kindness. My husband quietly walked into the laundry room and noticed the note in my hands. Without saying anything, he smiled. I handed it to him. As he read the sentence, I saw his eyes become watery too. After a long silence, he whispered, "I didn't know they noticed." "They notice everything," I answered softly. That moment reminded me of something child development experts often explain. Children learn emotional habits through repeated experiences rather than occasional speeches. When they regularly see respect, cooperation, patience, and gratitude, those behaviors become normal. They begin believing that healthy relationships are built through everyday actions instead of dramatic moments. Standing beside the washing machine, I realized we had been teaching that lesson without ever planning to. Our quiet conversation naturally turned into another opportunity to practice English. My husband gently said, "I'm proud of our family." I repeated the sentence aloud. Then he smiled and added, "Little moments become big memories." I loved how easy those expressions were. They used common words, but together they created beautiful meanings. I noticed that learning English through emotional moments helped me remember vocabulary much longer than studying alone. Every phrase became connected to a memory instead of just a translation. Later, while we folded the last blanket from the dryer, we laughed about how an ordinary weekend had become unexpectedly unforgettable. A washing machine, a handwritten note, a conversation with a neighbor, and a few simple English sentences had somehow become part of one meaningful story. It reminded me that happiness rarely arrives with loud music or bright lights. More often, it quietly sits beside you while you're folding warm towels together. Just before bedtime, my husband reached for his phone after hearing a notification. His smile slowly disappeared as he read the screen. Then he looked at me with an expression I had not seen all day. "You should probably read this," he said. The message came from someone we hadn't heard from in a very long time. As I took the phone from his hand, I had a strange feeling that this unexpected message was about to reveal the final piece of a story that had started with nothing more than a basket of dirty laundry. My new view of marriage. What if one unexpected message could make you relive years of your marriage in just a few minutes? As I looked at my husband's phone, I expected an ordinary text from a friend or a family member. Instead, I saw a name I hadn't heard in years. The message was short, but every word carried unexpected weight. Before I finished reading it, I realized our quiet Saturday had become something much bigger than a story about laundry. It had become a reminder that the smallest acts of love can travel farther than we ever imagine. The message came from an old family friend who had recently moved to another state. We had not spoken for a long time, so I was surprised to hear from her. She wrote, "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I still remember visiting your house last year. I watched the two of you cleaning the kitchen together while laughing about burnt pancakes. I didn't understand it then. Today I do." I smiled before reading the rest. My husband and I started sharing more of the housework after that visit. At first, it felt awkward because we weren't used to it. Now we talk more, laugh more, and somehow argue less. I just wanted to thank you. You probably thought it was an ordinary afternoon, but it quietly changed our family. I slowly lowered the phone. For several seconds, nobody spoke. It felt almost impossible that simple moments inside our home had reached people beyond our own family. We had never tried to teach anyone. We had never posted advice online or claimed to have the perfect marriage. We had simply lived the way that felt natural to us. My husband smiled gently and said, "Maybe people don't need perfect examples. Maybe they just need honest ones." That sentence stayed with me. Marriage, I realized, isn't built during anniversaries or holidays alone. It grows while folding socks, washing dishes after dinner, carrying grocery bags together, or asking, "Are you tired? I'll finish this." Those moments rarely appear in photo albums, yet they quietly become the strongest foundation of a happy family. Relationship researchers often describe something called emotional responsiveness. It means noticing your partner's everyday needs and responding with care instead of waiting for major problems to appear. Couples who consistently practice these small acts of support often develop stronger trust and long-term satisfaction because they feel seen, valued, and understood. Looking back, I realized our happiest memories had never required expensive vacations or elaborate surprises. They had simply required showing up for each other every ordinary day. That evening also gave me another natural English lesson. My husband looked at me and smiled before saying, "Thank you for choosing this life with me." I repeated the sentence quietly because it sounded beautiful in its simplicity. Then he added another expression I knew I would never forget. "Love is a verb." Those 4 words stayed in my heart. They reminded me that love is something we practice through actions, not something we simply describe with words. As we prepared to go upstairs for the night, I thought our unforgettable Saturday had finally reached its peaceful ending. Then the doorbell rang one last time. Standing outside was Emily, holding a small gift bag with a bright smile on her face. "I almost forgot," she said. "There's one more thing you both need to see." I exchanged a curious glance with my husband as she handed me the bag. The surprise waiting inside would become the perfect ending to a story that began with one simple load of laundry. Chores show real love. What if the final surprise inside a simple gift bag could leave you with one question you would remember for years? What does love actually look like? Most people expect romance to arrive with roses, vacations, or expensive jewelry. I used to think that too. But before this unforgettable Saturday ended, one small gift proved that the strongest marriages are often built where nobody is watching. And what I discovered that night changed not only how I saw my husband, but also how I listened, spoke, and understood English through everyday life. Emily handed me the gift bag with a warm smile. "Please open it when we're all together," she said. My husband stood beside me while our children came downstairs after hearing the voices at the front door. We gathered in the living room, curious about what could possibly be inside such a small package. I slowly lifted out a neatly folded white towel. At first, I was confused. Then I noticed beautiful blue embroidery stitched across one corner. It read, "Love lives in the little things." Under those words were 4 tiny embroidered icons, a washing machine, a coffee mug, a heart, and a small house. Emily laughed softly when she saw my expression. "My sister made it," she explained. She wanted to thank the family that reminded her love doesn't have to be loud to be real. I gently touched the embroidery with my fingertips. It wasn't an expensive gift. It wasn't something people would admire because of its price. Yet it instantly became one of the most meaningful gifts our family had ever received. My husband quietly wrapped his arm around my shoulder. Our youngest child smiled and said, "Can we hang it in the laundry room?" Everyone laughed. "Absolutely," I answered. That towel wasn't really decoration. It became a reminder. Every time we washed clothes, folded blankets, cleaned the kitchen, or worked side by side, we would remember that ordinary moments create extraordinary families. As I looked around our home that evening, I realized something that relationship experts often describe. Lasting happiness rarely depends on dramatic romantic events. Instead, it grows through repeated acts of kindness, appreciation, cooperation, and emotional safety. Small habits become strong relationships because they quietly build trust day after day. Science explains the process, but living it feels even more beautiful than reading about it. The weekend also reminded me why I love learning English through real life instead of memorizing endless vocabulary lists. Throughout the day, I naturally practiced expressions like, "We're a team," "I appreciate you," "Take your time," "Little things matter." Love is a verb, and actions speak louder than words. None of these sentences were difficult. Yet every phrase now carried a memory, a smile, and a meaningful conversation. That emotional connection made the language feel alive. I no longer remembered English because I forced myself to study. I remembered it because every word belonged to a real story. As we turned off the lights before bed, I looked once more toward the laundry room. The baskets were empty. The machines were quiet. The embroidered towel gently hung on the wall, almost like it had always belonged there. I smiled because I finally understood something I had spent years searching for. My American husband never needed grand speeches to tell me he loved me. Every washed shirt, every folded towel, every shared responsibility, every patient conversation, and every ordinary Saturday had been saying those 3 little words all along. That is all for today. I'll make many more videos like this in the future. Please subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Thank you for listening, practicing English with me, and becoming part of our journey. Remember, sometimes the smallest moments become the greatest love stories. See you in the next video.